Good evening, David. How are you?
Well, how are you, Polly?
Very good, thanks. Busy
Good
time.
evening. Hi, Polly. Hi, David.
Susan?
Hi, Tara. Hi, Rich. How are you today?
Well, I'm good.
Here we are. All right. Welcome, everyone. It is Wednesday, April 8th, and this is a public hearing of the Land Use Zoning and Sustainability Subcommittee of the Brookline Advisory Committee. My name is David Pollock. I'm Subcommittee Chair. I'm joined by a quorum of our members of Subcommittee, Linda Pelkey, Brian Ladd, and Lee Selwyn. And this is a public hearing on warrant Article 16, which is a zoning multifamily overlay proposal for a property of about 25,000 square feet at 26 Pleasant Street in Coolidge Corner. People are still joining and I'm letting them in. This is, as Brian said, it's a new circumstance for him anyway, in that the petitioners notified the moderator and me earlier today that they have resolved not to move this article to Maytown meeting. And so effectively, there's really no matter before town meeting. However, once a matter is entered into the warrant for town meeting, it stays in the warrant and it can't be withdrawn. And so theoretically, or in fact, any member of town meeting could decide to move this article on the floor of town meeting. Now, in this case, I don't think anybody sees any reason why anybody would, but we are still holding our public hearing because the advisory committee writes reports and recommendations to town meeting. And in order for the advisory committee to make a recommendation, it is, and this is the same for any board, including the select board or the planning board or any town committee. In order to make a recommendation, that board must hold a public hearing and hear from the public before it makes a recommendation. Now, I am hoping this will be a very short meeting and that a member of the subcommittee will make a motion that the subcommittee recommend to the advisory committee that the advisory committee recommends no action on warrant Article 16 because there is nothing to be done. But in order for the advisory committee to make a recommendation in the combined reports to town meeting of no action, the advisory committee has to have a public hearing. And the advisory committee routinely asks subcommittees to hold those public hearings. Hence, we are here tonight. Now, usually the way I run a subcommittee is that we first hear from the petitioner, then we hear from staff, then we have questions from subcommittee. And once all of the information has been made public, including answers to questions from subcommittee members, I open up the hearing to hear from the public, which is an inconvenience to the public because they have to wait around, but it allows them to be fully informed before they make public comment. I will veer from that usual procedure tonight because there's really no information to be learned, because as far as I can tell, no one is here representing the petitioner. Is that correct? Right. So I would have liked to have heard from the petitioner about their thinking in deciding not to move this article, because that would have informed us. But
I did speak with the petitioner, and I can tell you that the petitioner has decided that they would like to refine the design more, and then resubmit in the fall. So that is their intent, is to resubmit it in the fall.
And that's consistent with the email I received, in which their explanation was they wish to refine their intent. And I would only add, and I would have said this to them, if they were here, but it'll go into our record, that I hope that additionally their reasoning included not just refining their intent, but also hearing from the public and engaging the public in a community process. This is all, this is all in the future.
And quite frankly, I think one of the things that persuaded this is my opinion, the applicant to not move the article is that it was discovered by planning department that they need probably 2 or 3 variances. And as you all know, to get a variance from the Board of Appeals is not easy. And this project, even if it were passed by town meeting, was going to go through the Board of Appeals approval process. And they needed a variance for their front yard setback because in an M1 zone, section 5.43, which allows a special permit to waive most yard setbacks, does not allow waiving the front yard setback for an M1 district below 15 feet. And they were proposing something less than 15 feet. They also had miscalculated the usable open space because they had based it on the size of the lot. It's very confusing in our bylaw that the floor area, that usable and landscaped open space are a percentage, but they are a percentage of the floor area in the building, not of the lot. And so they were not meeting their own prescription for 10% of usable open space.
Their own prescription, right, which was a proposed reduction from the
Correct.
M1 requirement of
Right.
20%. Right. So what I would like to do is open the floor to public comment. We have received quite a few emails and letters. All of them have been forwarded to the administrator for the advisory committee, Lisa Porcher, for including in the agenda packet for this meeting. And so that will all be memorialized in the subcommittee's report. So anyone who has submitted a written comment, that's already a public comment, then it doesn't need to be repeated. Normally, I would be quite solicitous of hearing from the public at great length, but given that this is all practice, and all of your public comments will be more meaningful when they are in a true process that's leading to something at town meeting or in front of another board, I encourage everyone to be brief if they would like to make public comment. That all having been said, anybody can just use your raise your little yellow hand or raise your physical hand in the window, and let's hear from people who'd like to join the conversation.
I'm happy to speak. I having trouble with my little hand.
Oh, that's fine. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay, yes, hi, my name is Susan Park. Good to see everyone. I'm a town meeting member in precinct 17. And I already have sent in my written comments. So I won't reread my email. But I will say that as a town meeting member and having polled a lot of my neighbors up and down the street when I'm taking my dog out, no one knew about this development on 26 Pleasant, except for maybe the town meeting members who got a letter. And so as far as the public process, that really did not happen. I am happy that the petitioner is withdrawing his warrant. But I do have a question. So as far as process, since this warrant article 16 is still going to town meeting, even though the petitioners is withdrawing it, someone there could still say, let's vote on it, right? So if that were to happen and it were to be voted on, but the petitioner is, he had already withdrawn, what would happen then?
So it can't be withdrawn. It's in the warrant. The petitioner has said, and I think we can certainly believe this petitioner who's, represented Jeffrey Allen, an attorney, real estate attorney in town who has involvement in lots of different projects and wouldn't sacrifice his reputation with town meeting by going back on his word. So they won't move it. Town meeting is expecting that it won't be moved. If for some strange reason somebody else decided to move it from the floor, I just can't imagine that a majority of town meeting members would support it and vote for it when nobody really, there'd been no there'd been even less process than otherwise. So I would be astonished if any, virtually any town meeting members would go along with that. So I think that there's no real reason to have concerns. That's all my own personal opinion.
Okay.
Can I just add a footnote to that? My suspicion would be if someone did hop out of nowhere and moved it, someone else would hop up and immediately move to have it referred somewhere to avoid the chance of it actually being voted on one way or the other. That would be my guess.
Although the moderator doesn't take motions from the floor. I think the moderator Wyszynski wants 48 hours for any motions to be submitted to him in writing so that he can review them and everything. It would be highly irregular. I don't think we need to worry about it. All right, Rich. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Rich Schneider. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 2. I actually did not receive a letter similar to Susan, so I learned about it at the dog park through, I believe, Susan, actually. And I guess my bigger question is, I know we have this comprehensive plan. I know we, kind of went with the MBTA Community Act approach. But I'm getting very concerned about the density of building that's going on in this very, very small space. I live on Pleasant Street. I know what it's like to try to get out of Pleasant Street today. I think I realize that this isn't going up now, but I'm just wondering, how did this like bump up against things like the comprehensive plan and all of that? We've got a hotel, we've got a residential building, there's a 9-story building, approved over next to Trader Joe's. Like, I mean, this is going to create a public safety hazard. I was reading about Lexington the other day. They put up like what, 1,200 units or something. Now they can't handle it in their school. So how is this all connecting? I guess is my question. And especially, trying to get out of Pleasant Street and I see ambulance trying to get by. How are we going to deal with that? And again,
So
I
those
do
are
appreciate the need to build
right.
more housing.
That-
I really,
that-
really do. Just not all in one little spot,
So
Yeah.
there's sort of two ways to understand your question. One is, how did we arrive where we are tonight? And that's structural to our charter and to
Okay.
how the town is set up. So essentially, it takes 10 verified signatures of residents to submit something to be entered into the warrant. And so it's very easy to ask town meeting
Gotcha.
to
Right.
vote on,
So I
to
knew
vote on
that.
something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
the,
guess
the the lawyer for the developer, basically, they just decided to bring this forward, and then it comes to town meeting, and on its way to town meeting, it comes to the advisory committee, and this subcommittee just happens to deal with anything that's zoning, which is why, so we're stuck with it either way because of the nature.
Yes.
So
So
how
I
are we going to
appreciate the
actually, how are we going
process.
to actually deal with it? Maybe I'll let
Yeah.
Linda Pelkey address that as vice chair of
Yeah,
the
it's more how are we going to
plan.
deal with it. I follow the process pretty well.
Right.
Thank you,
Yeah.
though. Yeah, thank you.
Linda?
Thanks, David. I just wanted to add that one of the things in preparation to this meeting that I did do was draft a referral motion to send this to a moderator's study committee because I have the very same concerns that you do, Rich, that many people in our neighborhood have. That, we are under the gun in a way with Waldo Durgan being an absolutely huge, massive project. And while it is stalled, it has not gone away. We have not rescinded the zoning. And we are in the middle of a comprehensive planning process that is going to be producing a draft plan by the end of the summer. And we were out there, I don't know if you participated in that, I hope you did, but we were out there asking people to identify areas that they thought were suitable for additional growth and also looking at what type of buildings they are comfortable with. And, so we're just getting in the process of identifying those areas. And one of the criteria is, does that area have sufficient capacity in terms of infrastructure, roadways? Does it take care of advancing our climate goals, all sorts of criteria. And for me personally, asking people to respond honestly and respecting those opinions and doing this plan, this attempt to go straight to town meeting with a zoning proposal just completely was usurping that process altogether. And so we sprung into action quite quickly when we learned about this, because this is a very, in my opinion, deleterious way to do any kind of zoning, period. And we asked numerous times to have more meetings with the public in the neighborhood, and that was flatly refused. And frankly, hearing from David and Polly, some of the petitioners thinking, I'm going to have to do the same thing again in the fall if that's what he does, because it's not appropriate to not engage with the planning process as a whole. It just isn't. And accepting things like this, where we can't say, no, you can't file an article, but seriously considering it, some people support it. Doing all that is setting us up for this happening randomly all over town anywhere. Anyone can do this. 10 signatures. It's the easiest thing in the world. And we really should not open ourselves up to that. We need much better land use planning and control and decision making that is more inclusive at a minimum. So
Linda, thank you so very much. That's exactly what I was hoping to learn. Thank you.
good.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks. I could help.
All right, we'll go to Tara and then Al and then Elise.
Hi, Tara Collins. I live on James Street. 23-year resident of Brookline. I lived on John Street before, so I'm intimately familiar with this exact area. I was really surprised by the process because I think, considered a butter. I'm within 300 feet, and we were not notified at all of this. I learned about the potential for the article for the warrant through a posting that someone had put up to share with the neighborhood. So the neighbors were sharing it. It wasn't shared through the town or through the developer. And that was when I was notified of I'm going to say it wrong, but I think it was the planning board meeting when the developer presented it to the planning board. And we weren't allowed public comment, but he sat there and said, oh, we've talked, the neighbors know that we've told people. And I sat there and said, never, was not notified whatsoever. So again, I'm just surprised by the process. I was asking someone today, well, where are the studies with regards to traffic studies and shadow studies? And apparently there are none. So I don't understand how that can go through without any type of studies happening from that perspective. And then with regards to parking, I just think parking, it's not going away in Brookline, and to take away parking spaces and then add more people, I'm just very concerned about that because we have an issue with the lack of parking.
So the planning board, when someone applies for any kind of zoning relief, the planning board notifies abutters and there's an established process. In this case, this is a town meeting matter, and that those kinds of like notifications by the planning department aren't invoked because it's not that normal planning and zoning relief for special permit or variance process. This is just a political matter in front of town meeting. So it's sort of an oddity. And your question about, well, if and then the other thing is that the town meeting in this article is not being asked to approve a project at all. What it's being asked to do is change the zoning with an overlay that would allow a much bigger project. But that much bigger project would then be subject to a prolonged approval process in front of the planning board and the zoning board, in which all of the traffic and parking and everything else would come up. But it would be after the allowance was made into law for a bigger project. So that's just how we got where we are. But that's why the specific issues to this project, haven't been raised, because the project hasn't really been presented. I mean, it's been presented, but it's not in front of town meeting. For all of the pretty pictures of a project, that's not in front of town meeting. The warrant article is just a zoning change. Does that help?
It does, but I guess I find it hard to understand how they can vote on a zoning change without knowing what the project's going to be, or I guess.
You would hope.
Well, but there's a kind of a chicken and egg thing there, because we also have dialogue around zoning in town that we shouldn't only be doing zoning for specific projects. We should be making zoning that's appropriate for any future project. But your basic point, we should be right sizing the zoning with a thorough understanding of the conditions at the site or in the neighborhood, is absolutely cogent and pertinent. But ultimately, the political process is that then town meeting will need to decide if this is a good idea, if there's enough information, if there's been enough public process. And it would have, if this were to be brought forward in May, and maybe town meeting would have said the same thing that Linda just said, that this isn't the right way to do zoning and we don't like it. But we won't know at this point.
My just last statement was just, again, going back to the parking. I know they had mentioned, oh, that parking is underutilized right now, but I think it's going to be a different type of traffic pattern if people are living there and going in and out. I think a lot of that parking today are people, might be workers. They're renting during the day out of that parking lot area, but the traffic pattern is very challenging. I don't go down Pleasant Street because you cannot get onto Beacon Street from there. I go around the block, and it's just extremely challenging. So that's all I wanted to share.
Thank you. Al?
Thank you. A lot of what I want to express has already been said, and I'm very relieved to hear that this developer, in an attempt to do an end around to all this dialogue and all this consideration, is probably going to fail. I'm also relieved to hear that there's a lot of awareness to the process. I will say that to people that live in this neighborhood, just look at what people living in a neighborhood could do with St. Aidan's, taking an ungainly project that was just really in the face of everybody, and with a lot of organization and a lot of participation, we were able to turn that around into a more sensible housing project that it is today. And I think that there's a real need to get on this particular proposal. I mean, the idea of 103 units, and Waldo is 132 units and 160 hotel rooms. There's Brookline Housing with 100 units. I mean, the goal is to house people, but not to see if we can do it in record numbers without any consideration to the impact on the environment we're living in. I really want to also bring up James Street, which is where we also live. It's ridiculous to think what's going to happen traffic-wise and safety-wise when all this stuff lands in the same spot. And traffic that's already a mess now is just going to be exacerbated to the point that cars are going to be tearing up these streets trying to get around all this traffic. To Tara's point, we all know the routine around here. You already can't navigate through these neighborhoods, and yeah, it's inconvenient as a resident just being here. But when you think about fire engines and ambulances trying to move their way through a neighborhood, this could be a real disaster. And I think it's very important that the people that have the opportunity to weigh in on this, to control this, to mitigate this, need to be very active to keep this under control. Thank you.
Elise.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. I'm Elise Couture Stone. I am fairly new to actually the advisory committee, so I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to learn a little bit more about the land use committee, and so I appreciate you giving me the time. So I have a question. Considering process, for instance, first, my understanding is that the petitioner actually pulled this warrant article.
Right. So I think I answered your question at the outset before you joined, but
Oh, okay.
as the moderator informed the petitioner, there's no such thing as pulling a warrant article. Once something is in the warrant, it cannot be removed. And so what we have is the petitioner having stated that they are not going to move the article. In theory, somebody else could move it at town meeting. That is always a possibility, but it's the chance of that happening in this case is slim, right? It's not, nobody else would do it. It wouldn't pass. Nonetheless, the advisory committee, any committee that wishes to make a recommendation to town meeting needs to hold a public hearing. And so that's why the subcommittee is holding a public hearing now and hearing from the public. But my hope is that when we're done hearing from the public, subcommittee will simply vote a recommendation of no action. And then advisory committee will also vote a recommendation of no action. And then the advisory committee's report and recommendation in the combined reports will be something as simple as the petitioner has indicated they will not move the article, the advisory committee recommends no action. So this is pure process that we're doing now, in the sense that there isn't an article that's moving forward to hear from the public, but it's not just pure process in the sense that this is a significant land use proposal that was brought forward, and we're members of the community are having a chance to talk about it and on the record, and it'll be on the record. So that's good.
Okay. So then my question thank you for sharing that with me, David. So I guess my question then is to Linda, just again, curious out of process, if we're talking about process, why would we move to refer this to a moderators committee as opposed to, say, like the planning board? Like a team of professionals who then could get into the nitty-gritty of all of the questions being asked.
Well, I don't think that describes the planning board to begin with, but because it's about having neighborhood representation as well as having the expertise. And we're in terms of the comprehensive plan study committee, we're trying to look more holistically at these questions. And that is not something that the planning board does. But it's kind of a moot point at this point.
Oh, so your general sense is that the planning board doesn't include community or neighborhood input in that design process? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Paul Dickinson.
Sorry, I had to figure out how to unmute. First, thank you very much for having this meeting, and also thank you for allowing everyone to speak. I've been to other town meetings where they do not allow people to speak, even though we were under the impression we would be able to. So I really do appreciate this. I also think that most of what I was going to say has already kind of been addressed in some ways. Again, I guess I'll point out it seems like there's been no type of impact assessment with regard to this development. I would hope that those things are going to be done. You know, there's various, we mentioned the traffic, there's the wind impact, things like that. And I think also the town needs to look at this, not just at this project in a vacuum. You need to consider what's already been approved in that specific area, right? We mentioned the other project that's going to be the hotel and the residential
Waldo
building.
Durgan.
You know, yeah, the Waldo. And that's going to create that together with this and together with the other, I believe there's a 9-story building that's been approved over by Trader Joe's. You know, that's going to create an adverse impact on this little part of Coolidge Corner, right? In for this particular development, there's 100 units in regards to parking. There's 100 units. There's 60 parking spaces, as I understand it, that are going to replace the existing 62 spots, right? So I'd like to know how they come up with these numbers. Why do they think that 40 units are not going to have cars? And what are those other 62, the people that are parking there now, where are they going to go, right? Where are those cars going to go, right? And then I don't know if you drive down Pleasant Street at all, but it's already very difficult to get onto Beacon Street and go through Coolidge Corner there. It's going to be impossible with all these units. So another question is, are they going to close that entrance to Beacon Street? So there are things like this that I don't think the town, it sounds like the town has not yet considered. And I just want to make sure that those things are going to be considered. And then when they are considering these things, I also did not receive a notification. I know that most people on this call did not receive a notification about this development. So when they're looking at this, not only should they notify the abutters, but they should notify people in the whole area, because this isn't going to just impact abutters. It's going to impact the whole neighborhood, right? People, when they're driving down the street looking for parking, now they're going to park all over the place in this area because there's not going to be any spots, right? And they should be reviewing this during peak hours, right? So also when students are here, things like that. Now, I'm hoping that they already know all that and they are going to do that. But I guess I just want to make sure that the town is soliciting input from the people and paying attention to all the different items that are in fact going to have an adverse impact on this area. Like, I know I'm going to jump into slightly larger. It seems that the town always wants to put everything in Coolidge Corner, and I don't understand that. Like, we can spread it out. So I'll leave that as my final comment.
Right. So I explained earlier that this is unusual for a development project in that it's not a development project coming to the town. It's a zoning proposal change coming to town meeting. And so the notification protocols didn't kick in that would generally kick in when an actual development project is brought forward. Now, we could ask the question, if a zoning change is impactful on a neighborhood, maybe the town in relation to, and town meeting should do the same kind of notifications, but that would be something to sort of suggest to the moderator and to the select board as a change to town meeting process. So that's sort of bigger picture. As far as your question about will those concerns about traffic and parking and wind and everything else be, how would they be taken up in relation to a development project like the one that's been drawn here as a first pass? I will call on our Director of Regulatory Planning from Town Hall, Polly Selko, to just give us a quick overview of how the review for major projects, what gets done.
Sure. Thank you, David. If this zoning were passed and the applicant did submit it to the Board of Appeals, they would need to go through the whole special permit approval process. And it would be a major impact project which means that actually there's a preliminary process that they go through before they even apply. And during that preliminary process, we have to notify all the town meeting members, and we have to tell the developer to hold a neighborhood meeting. Then when they go to the planning board, which they may go to the planning board several times, well, first they would go to a design advisory team. The design advisory team would work with the development team on the design issues. And then when it goes to the planning board would want to know about shadow impacts, wind impacts, traffic impacts. They would likely need to hire a traffic consultant to give a traffic impact statement. And then the planning board would consider all those things. They would often ask for changes to the proposal, maybe making it smaller. And then it would go to the Board of Appeals, and it's the Board of Appeals that approves the project. Now, once the Board of Appeals approves a project, it is subject to appeal within 20 days of the decision being filed, and the appeal is to Superior or to Land Court. So there is a whole process that it would go through if the zoning were to be approved at a future town meeting. And just to answer that, there was a question about the impact from traffic, school population, pollution, et cetera. And I'll just tell you that we're really not allowed to consider the school impact. That's not something that the Board of Appeals does. The town is supposed to see that, there's appropriate education for everybody in the town. One of the things that the boards might look at is whether they should be providing more affordable units than are required by law, or maybe more usable open space than are required by law. So all of these things would be dealt with, and it's a very long, comprehensive process. And that only starts if the zoning were to be approved and once the applicant actually wanted to file the project.
Sorry,
Thank you.
I'm
Can I
sorry,
have-
can I
Sorry,
ask?
I just want to clarify something. Sorry, Paul.
ahead.
I just wanted to comment on the notification question because I asked Kara Bruton about this particular article and how the planning department was going to respond. And what she said was that the public hearing at the planning board, which I don't know if that's going to still happen, which I think was scheduled for April 30th, that's when people would get notified in the same way that they would for the zoning change that David talked about. But I just want to caution people to understand that if the zoning were passed, that is what is going to get permitted. I mean, we can tweak the designs, we can ask them to analyze forever, but once that zoning is law, that's what they're going to get to build. Almost always, always, always. There is no time when they show up and we don't like this proposal. Sorry, get out of here. That never happens. And almost always special permits are granted. Now, variances, that's another thing. But I wouldn't, the developer tried to tell the neighborhood, well, don't worry about it because there's this big process. But once you've voted in those parameters that were 4 times as big as what's allowed now, you're pretty much stuck with that because by law, the ZBA doesn't have the right to restrict what's been granted already in the zoning. So I just hope people think about that.
Well, I have to disagree a little bit. It is true that, it does set the parameters, and maybe most of the time those are the parameters that are allowed. But the Board of Appeals is allowed to, anytime a project needs a special permit, to require buildings to have greater yard setbacks. They could require a smaller building. They can require that. And I'm not saying that would happen often, but it has happened in the past.
All right, we've
Can I
got
just-
a couple of members of the public. Paul, did you want to say anything more?
Yeah, just real quick, sorry. As part of the, I guess I'll call it impact reviews, do they consider emergency services and police services, things like that? So that's one. And two, it seems to me that this is somewhat of a loophole that they've taken advantage of. Is that true? And is that something that we as a community or town meeting could try to close?
Well, the ability for a resident, or I'm not sure who can submit a warrant article, but you need 10 signatures. And then you can submit a warrant article to the select board, and the select board puts it on the warrant. So if you want to, you can call it a loophole. It's certainly a wide open road to bringing anything you want to town meeting. That we've been a town for over 300 years, and that's the process. So we don't have to like it, but it's not easy to change it. I mean, there's been a
David-
movement to have a city charter to completely change the structure of the town that's been in play for a few years. Polly?
David, years ago, you needed 100 signatures, citizen petitioners. And that was changed by town meeting because they wanted it to be more accessible to people.
Right, but 100 signatures is no different than 10 if you're doing a giant project like this. So, but this is all right.
David, can I
make
a comment?
You
at this
can.
point?
I'd like to hear from the public, but if you want to interject, Lee, go
Well,
ahead, or else.
let me. I mean, others have made comments, so let me just throw
Sure.
my 2 cents worth in. I mean, Linda, referenced the comprehensive plan. Town meeting voted overwhelmingly to support the comprehensive plan, and that's underway. And yet, we still see a succession of what I, as a non-attorney, will still describe as a spot zoning. I understand there's a legal distinction with these overlays, but at the end of the day, you have a basic, a base zoning regulation, and then you pick a particular parcel. You hire one of the towny real estate law firms, and they throw in a warrant article, and they try to create an overlay to the exclusive benefit of that particular parcel. And there was a reference here to somehow this having a relationship with the MBTA Communities Act because of its location relative to public transit. And we spent 2 years ago, we spent a lot of time, and town meeting spent a lot of time coming up with a zoning zoning change that was intended to, and that did put the town in compliance with the MBTA Communities Act. We looked at various options. We upzoned portions of Harvard Street, and we made changes on Beacon Street. I don't remember where the other ones were, but we addressed this issue. This has nothing whatever to do with the MBTA Communities Act. It is not required by the MBTA Communities Act. It doesn't make us any more compliant with the MBTA Communities Act than we already are. And, if town meeting continues to tolerate this kind of chipping away at our zoning bylaw, comprehensive plan isn't going to be worth the paper it's printed on. And I don't care. This could be the most marvelous project in the world, and I'd be a no on it because I just don't like this process. There is a process we have put in play. Town meeting overwhelmingly supported it, and the response the town meeting ought to give to a project like this is hell no.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Kevin, and then Robert.
Hello, I live at 4 Dwight Street, and I've been a Brookline resident for 22 years. I had heard nothing about this project like a lot of people, and haven't seen any haven't seen any design proposals, so I don't know how much I can comment on the merits of the project, but I would like to say that from what's been described tonight is sort of taking this to town meeting to change the zoning without community input is kind of a slap in the face to the community and an act of bad faith on the part of the developers. I also think that Lee's comment of spot zoning seems to hit the nail on the head. They're asking for a zoning change to accommodate this particular project. That seems to me to be a bad way to make public policy in general. And it does beg the question, well, wait, I mean, one of the thoughts I had when I heard about the setback variance was, no, a project of this size should never get a setback variance. In fact, the setback, if they want to build a tall 6 to 8 story building, the setback should be increased. Something like the apartment building that backs up against the Florida Ridley School has, all kinds of some open space in front. Would it be possible for us to go to town meeting and sign and put forth a warrant question to restrict this to down zone, basically? That's all I have.
Thank you.
The answer to that is yes.
Robert Donnelly. You're muted, so you raised your hand. I assume you wanted to make a public comment, Mr. Donnelly? We can come back to you.
He may
Kate.
not realize he's on mute.
Yeah, you're muted, Robert Donnelly. You have to figure out how to unmute. Let's go to Kate, please, Gascoigne, who also has to unmute.
Hi, Kate Gascoigne, longtime Coolidge Corner resident, coming up on 24 years. I've lived in the same apartment on Pleasant Street, just up from the little library, which is a little treasure in our little neighborhood. Tons of kids go there. We have so many kids on these streets every morning and all day long. And if we're going to talk about, these projects, it's crazy. Somebody's going to die. Somebody's kid is really, I'm serious. People race up and down Pleasant Street. I live here. I know. We tried to get the speed limit reduced years ago, and the town said, no, people aren't speeding fast enough for us to give out tickets. And they weren't willing to reduce the speed limit. But anyway, that's not even what I wanted to say. I want to say, first of all, thank you for allowing me to speak, for allowing all of us to speak. I'm relieved that the proposal has been rescinded. This project would be overwhelming for our neighborhood, especially with the impending Waldo Durgan project, which is going to upend our existence. 8 to 10 story hotel with 200 rooms, 14-story apartment building with 140 apartments. We still face multiple housing projects and are absorbing others. Babcock Place, they turned that into a 5-story building with upwards of 50 units. Crazy. And they didn't even stop with the building. They made it go along the back of the property, and the neighbors behind that were fighting it. Come on, man, you're blocking off our sun. They were cutting down trees and people were ignored. I know someone who lives back there. It was horrible. 153 St. Paul, the transformation of the Bertram Inn and a single family next door into 13 condos. Blocking, it's just crazy. It's crazy. 135 St. Paul, single family into a 4-story building with 6 units. 80 on Vernon, single family, now 8-unit building. The Marion Street with 115 units of affordable housing. I'm all for affordable housing. It's killing us. It's the foot traffic, the nuisance Uber drivers on their mopeds. People are speeding. People are run. I've never seen so many red lights run in the last 8 months. It's crazy. People are going out of their minds. And the impending 1299 Beacon, 8 to 9 stories with 55 units. You're killing what everybody loves, or this would kill what everyone loves about Brookline and why people want to be here. They want to be here because it's a calmer pace. There's open space. Let's try to preserve that. We're turning into Brighton. Next thing you know, we're going to have overnight parking on the streets. I mean, seriously, sorry. It's too much. It's too much. We're losing our quality of life. It would be great if we could get, Elon Musk, buy that property and turn it into a park. Let's have a park across from the library. So all the kids that go to the library every day with their nannies and their parents can maybe go across the street and be in a park. Wouldn't that be crazy? Wouldn't that be great for our neighborhood? That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Mr. Donnelly, do you figure out how to unmute? Oh, good. Perfect.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Sorry, I was
Go
out,
right
I'm out
ahead.
for a ride. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for having this meeting this evening. I just wanted to bring up a point of what I heard earlier with regards to, the attorney being familiar with the town and the laws. So he would know that this was a backdoor way to get approval for a project, because I think the other comment I heard is once the zoning is approved, the building almost always go in, I think was the quote. So my question is, how do I get notified if they change their mind again and decide to push it forward? Go to the person you mentioned who wants the 48-hour notice and then shows up at town meeting and pushes it forward. How do we as town members have protection or made aware of that? Thank you for the opportunity for the question.
I think the literal answer to your question is to be in communication with your 15 town meeting members from your precinct and ask them to, just reach out to them personally and ask them to inform you. I don't know if any other members of the subcommittee think that there's any chance that somebody would move this at town meeting. Personally, I think there's no reason to lose any sleep. This is the developer has said, the petitioner has said they're bringing it back in November. So it's happening. It's happening now. It's not happening in May now. It's just going to happen 6 months later, according to the petitioner. I see.
Just on that point, if it were to be moved and if it failed, for any of the reasons that the folks speaking tonight have suggested, they would be blocked for 2 years to reintroduce it. So it's absolutely not in their interest to have a plan that they're not comfortable with moved at this point.
Yeah, good point. I still see some people have their hands raised. Susan, did you want to speak again, or you just, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so talking about these traffic studies, it is so important that the traffic study is independent of a developer, because as we all know, a developer can get any traffic study passed or can tweak it or make it sound okay. And so it's and in this case, we see that it wasn't independent of the developer. And being living on James Street, so a lot of us who live in the area, we know not to go down Pleasant Street and onto Beacon because there's just traffic. There's so much traffic that there's a police officer who is stationed at 5 o'clock at the intersection of Harvard and Beacon. Okay, and so we have a police officer there yesterday, even though I was like, oh, I do not want to go down Pleasant to turn on Beacon, but I just, for myself, I knew I'm coming to this meeting, so I went. I took a left on James, and I sat there for 3 minutes. The lights turned 3 times, and the traffic barely moved. And this is on a Tuesday night at 5:05. Tuesday, when it's it's not a weekend. So I'm really concerned with everyone else who spoke tonight about the traffic. We're going to have up to 400 new people, and there's Ubers. I've seen, living on James, I've seen so many fire trucks and ambulances because there's a lot of elderly people who live in the Sussman house. Sometimes it happens twice a day. And so, for these fire trucks and ambulances to get through, I mean, this is going to be a nightmare. So this really has to be looked at carefully. I'm glad that they are not bringing this to town meeting in May, but a lot needs to be done before November. The other thing is, I really do want to push back about the notification, because when Norblum and his attorney had that meeting in November, there was probably about 15-20 people, but the majority of people on this call, minus me, knew nothing about this. And so there is however way they are notifying people, it's not carefully done. It's almost like they just picked a handful so that they can say, we had a meeting, we had a community meeting. But then even in the report, or, I heard that they said that this was welcome. You know, that's just not the case. I mean, how can it be welcome when no one knew about it? And then when I was there, it wasn't a majority welcome. There were concerns. And so this whole process needs to be dealt with carefully and done again. And a lot of my constituents on this call, like I feel for them because they didn't know about this either. And so I just want to reassure them that the next time around, and like what Robert said, like, let's say that this guy changes his mind, there's another meeting. Well, what if he doesn't get notified, or what if no one gets notified, or if I don't get, you know what I mean? It's just it's really disappointing. So I hope that this will all be put in the notes and talked about at the full advisory committee. Thank you.
Elise, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, so I think if I'm hearing and interpreting a lot of what folks have been saying tonight is that there's a real mistrust with the process as it currently is right now. And I'm curious, just as a new person, if we can, you know, what would look like an awesome proposal. So for instance, I hear all the time, oh yes, we are all for affordable housing. We are all for more homes in Brookline. This is something that's really needed. And I hear that as like a quick caveat prior to but I very much distrust the rest of this process that has been part of our process for 300 years, as David noted. So I'm just curious, as a new person, how do we move around that? How do we actually start to work together to be able to include this very much needed affordable housing while still addressing exactly what everybody's been saying? Like, I have kids, they walk down to the library all the time. I know how hairy that space can get during certain hours. So I definitely hear that. But I'm just curious, how do we get around that? How do we work together? What do we do? How can I help?
Right. So I don't think I mean, I'm going to take your question as rhetorical, because really the business of this subcommittee at this moment is to deal with the warrant article. However, I, I don't think there are any other members of the public who want to make public comment. I'll pose that as a question. Is there anybody who hasn't made a public comment who'd like to make a public comment? So seeing none,
I will move no action.
I will
I
close the
recommend,
public hearing portion of this meeting. I have a motion from Lee Selwyn to recommend no action on warrant article 16. Is there a
I'll
second?
second that, but can I ask a process question here tonight?
I have one too, but go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, and you can ask a question, but I wasn't going to go to a vote without discussion. We still haven't had subcommittee discussion. So I was
yeah,
going to
I
give
know.
everybody a shot I was going to give everybody on the
But
subcommittee.
before people
Yes.
leave the meeting, I heard from many constituents in my precinct that I don't know. Is it appropriate for me to put my email in the chat and ask these individuals to please contact me so that when we're dealing with this down the road, I can notify them?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem
I
with
mean,
that.
this is bold, making my email public, so don't spam me. But I want to hear from you folks because, you know, we haven't met yet, and I've been a town meeting member here for a while, and that's unfortunate. So if you want to keep in touch, please let me know. Thanks.
All right. We have a motion. Brian, you wanted to make a comment?
So
Or
I just beginner's question, is there a distinction between no action and no recommendation as things that we could vote on?
yeah, no recommendation would be the advisory committee doesn't really have anything to say about an article, but I support Lee's motion of recommending no action because I think that the correct the advisory committee should say to town meeting, given that on the face of it, this isn't being moved. And so, other boards, it was sort of the process was short circuited. It's not, it would be inappropriate for town meeting to pass this, given that it's been taken off the rails by the petitioner. And furthermore, individual advisory committee members could have other reasons to recommend no action. That they don't like the proposal on its merits, they don't like the process on its merits. For any number of reasons, advisory committee members might go along with a recommendation of no action. As far as the subcommittee is concerned, I don't think I have to. I don't like the process, and I think that what's been proposed is too big for the site and some various other concerns. But I don't need to go beyond the fact that it's not being moved. And so I want to make sure it doesn't get moved simply as a matter of process. And so I support no action. No recommendation would be if there was a warrant article about some world affair that people didn't feel like advisory committee had an opinion about, that we don't want to wade in there. And so we just stay out of the fray and don't make a recommendation. I think it's important to make a recommendation here.
Well, the fact that something really crazy could happen at town meeting, God help us, it kind of makes me wonder, is there anything we should do with the referral motion to have that ready if we need it?
I mean, you could write to the moderator and see what he said. If you wanted to have it ready, I think you would need to submit it to him for review. And then you would probably
Okay, I'll do that tomorrow.
Yeah, you'd probably also want to have
legal.
Advisory committee has in the past done exactly what you're outlining, which is advisory committee has recently, I think, made a recommendation to town meeting of no action, and under certain circumstances, if something happened, then a referral would be the advisory committee's recommendation or whatever. So we sometimes have those sequential kinds of if then reports from recommendations from advisory committee. It's happened before.
Right.
Can we
All
vote?
right.
I mean, I'm
Yes.
a no because we all should say no and not let this kind of thing happen. That's where I've been since the day one I saw it.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm going to call on Kelly because she said she had to leave 5 minutes ago. Kelly, do you have a vote?
Thanks. My vote.
Can't hear you, Kelly.
It's all garbled. We didn't hear you.
Okay, let me try that again.
Yeah.
I'm a yes for no action. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Brian?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Okay, so I vote yes. It's unanimous that we're going to recommend to the advisory committee that it recommend no action on warrant article 16. And
Polly, what do you think the planning board's going to do?
I've got to leave, so I will. Are we done?
yeah, we're done.
Yeah, we
Okay.
voted. Thanks, Lee.
Night, everybody.
I
Bye.
have no idea what they're
Thank you
gonna.
all.
Okay.
Well, I think the planning board may not even discuss it. There was an email today about.
I know, I did send out a second email, and it was really a response to your email, David, because I didn't realize that, there could be, something could be moved from the floor of town meeting. So I will keep it on as a hearing for them to make a recommendation, and I think they very well might agree with you, but I really have no idea.
Great. And Lauren Bernard, I see you just joined us. You should know that this article is not being moved at town meeting, so it's relatively moot, but we did hold a public hearing, and if you wanted to join the fray and make a comment, please please feel free.
Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't join at the normal time. I was in an oral surgery procedure, so if I sound funny, I'm a little bit numb. It ended late. But I understand the warrant article was pulled, and I don't know how many people have and first of all, I didn't introduce myself, Lauren Bernard, precinct 17, former town meeting member, and I sat on the Coolidge Corner Study Committee that studied the Waldo Durgan parcel. And the one comment I would like to leave is that I am fully supportive of creating more housing. I don't have a lot of sympathy for it's too dense already. We live in an urban area and we chose to live there. I live next to the Waldo Durgan thing. So and that is not even happening for the foreseeable future. So we're left with an excavation site. But what I would like to say is if the petitioner comes back to move this article again, there needs to be more of a process. There needs to be, we met for 3 years, almost every month, and had conversations with Chestnut Hill Realty. It was a select board members committee, and it felt it was a very thorough process. There were shadow studies, there were traffic studies, there were soil sample studies, there were all of these things. So when it got presented to town meeting for a zoning change, there was a lot to look at. There was a lot to consider. There had been a lot of due diligence. This felt very rushed. So I'd like to leave you with that thought. And also, and I'm sure nobody's mentioned this, but I think one thing that has to happen before there's any more development in this area is there needs to be a serious look at sort of, I know everybody's sick of hearing about it, the rat problem, because, Waldo Durgan, those buildings were taken down. They poured in all this gravel, and we have rats in our basement. But the whole area has, this rat problem. That has to be part of it, serious mitigation before anything starts on this project, on any project in the Coolidge Corner area. And I know this sounds like a footnote, but it really isn't. It's a public health hazard. And I just think, like I said, when we came to town meeting with the warrant article that produced the zoning overlay for the Waldo Durgan site, that we had a lot of information at hand, and none of this was done. And I suspect there's a much higher bar when it involves commercial development than purely residential. But still, the whole thing felt half baked, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Any closing remarks, Linda?
Yeah, I just want to say that there was a lot more public input than what we heard tonight. There were plenty of people that I notified, hey, you don't really have to come to the meeting because it's been pulled. So I don't think we have the full representation of, the public's take on this, although we did hear some very meaningful comments. So it's not the full. Had we been holding a real hearing, I think we would have heard from a lot more people.
Perhaps.
And we have written testimony from many of those people.
Yeah.
Who then didn't see the point of coming tonight, understandably. I mean, I was busy notifying people once I got the news this morning, as apparently you were as well, Linda.
Yeah. So just to reassure everyone, written comment that was submitted in advance of the meeting to generally it was all emailed to me and to Lisa Porcher, and Lisa was not on in town hall today, but she will get it all into the agenda packet. It's all was received earlier today, and all of that has the same standing as public comment as people who managed to make it to the meeting. And Linda, are you still gonna write
for doing the write-up? Yeah, I probably will need a little hand holding. It's been a couple of years since I've had to do this, so
okay. And I just encourage you that we only heard, importantly, we only heard from citizens who were sort of ranging from concerned to appalled by this proposal. Tonight, we didn't hear from anybody who thought, I mean, we did hear from Lauren Bernard, and we heard from I mean, from Elise, we heard some support for housing. We didn't hear much support for anything that had been put forward here. But in the written record, which I haven't read everything that just came in today, there were letters of support for the warrant article and for the project. And please, Linda, also review those and include those
Sure.
points of view in the report as well.
If you could send me the link to the recording as soon as possible, that would help me get going.
I shall.
Okay.
Okay, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.